Hi, I'm Andy Miocha and you're watching A News. Here are the headlines. Tensions high in Georgia as clashes erupt between police and protesters in Tbilisi. Chad ends defense pact with France. Senegal calls on French troops to leave as well. Australia introduces ban on social media for children under 16. Tensions are running high in Georgia, where riot police used pepper spray and water cannons against protesters in the capital after the government suspended moves to join the European Union until the end of 2028. Hours earlier, EU lawmakers called for last month's parliamentary elections in Georgia to be rerun, citing significant irregularities.
Thousands of pro-European protesters took to the streets in Tbilisi in the early hours of Friday. They're angry with the Georgian government's decision to suspend EU membership negotiations and forego budgetary grants for the next 4 years. The announcement has ignited widespread outrage in a country where 80% of the population supports EU integration, according to an opinion poll.
We are angry. This anger was, I don't know, it was gathering between the people, and now it's the day. Today they decided to end our history, everything what we have achieved for past 30 years, and not only that, for past maybe 100 years. They just decided to end everything today, and we will not let them do it. I don't know. We will not take it anymore. That's today. It should be decided, like who we are, who we were, and where we are going.
Of course we're upset. We are so angry. It's literally beyond embarrassing. What this government is doing to us, it's literally like.
This is really unbelievable. We are teenagers. This is the new generation. I cannot believe. The words cannot describe what is happening today.
This is so disrespectful to our culture, to our people, for everyone around us.
Georgians who fought for years to defeat Russians, and now what
is
happening?
To become independent. Like, we've done so much to become who we are today.
They attempted to storm the Parliament building and riot police responded with tear gas, water cannons and pepper spray. The Interior Ministry confirmed more than 30 police officers were injured during the protests, with 13 requiring surgical intervention. Meanwhile, 43 protesters were arrested. The country's president, Salome Zurabishvili, condemned the government, accusing it of waging a war on its people and publicly confronting riot police, questioning their loyalty to Georgia or Russia. The Georgian government defends its decision, and it reiterated that Georgia would pursue EU membership on its own terms with the goal of joining the bloc by 2030. Relations between Georgia and the European Union have deteriorated sharply in recent months. Brussels has accused the Georgian government of adopting authoritarian policies and aligning with pro-Russian interests, claims which the government has vehemently denied. Officials have accused the EU of attempting to pressurize Georgia into compliance with foreign demands, labeling it as blackmail. The protests have now spread beyond Tbilisi, with unrest reported in provincial cities, underscoring growing public dissatisfaction.
For more on the latest developments in Georgia, we go to Tbilisi and our Leila Rahimli.
Hello, I am Leila Rahimli reporting from Tbilisi. Georgia is in turmoil following the ruling Georgian Dream Party's decision to hold European Union accession negotiations until 2028, announced Prime Minister Irakli Kabakhidze earlier this week. This decision includes rejecting EU budget support and has provoked nationwide outrage. Yesterday, in Tbilisi, tens of thousands of pro-European demonstrators have taken to the streets, waving EU and Georgian flags and blocking major roads. Initially, protesters gathered in 3 key locations: outside the Parliament, the Georgian Dream headquarters, and the presidential administration. By late evening, the rallies merged into a massive demonstration in front of the Parliament building, turning Rustaveli Avenue into the epicenter of the protests. Shortly after midnight, riot police used tear gas and water cannons against demonstrators, leading to violent clashes. Protesters responded by erecting barricades, some of which were set ablaze. The crackdown continued in the early morning hours, with police detaining dozens of protesters. According to the Minister of Interior, 43 people were arrested and 32 police officers were injured. Reports indicate several journalists covering the protests were also detained or injured. And also few demonstrators threw fireworks at the police, while some attempts to smash metal barrier outside of Parliament. President Salome Zurabishvili has joined the protesters, calling for new elections and declaring herself the only legitimate authority in the country. Greeted with chants of her name, she urged opposition leaders to unite and accused the government of turning away from Europe. Protests have also spread to major cities like Batumi, Kutaisi, Gori and Zugdidi, with thousands demanding a return to Georgia's European path. Demonstrators here in Tbilisi continue to call from the government's resignation, chanting, "We choose Europe." The EU, which had already frozen Georgia's membership application, blames the Georgian Dream Party for the deterioration of the democratic institutions, citing election irregularities, voter intimidation and media interference. Meanwhile, Kabakhidze has defended his party's decision, claiming Georgia remains committed to EU integration but will proceed on its own terms as a proud and self-respecting nation. The EU ambassador to Georgia, Pavel Herchisky, said 27 EU member states is scheduled for December 16 at the Foreign Affairs Council meeting. We have been talking about this for many months. Among these options is also the issue of suspending the visa-free regime for Georgia, but this will be discussed and decided by 27 EU countries together. The situation here is more tense than ever. Some universities in Georgia are temporarily suspending their educational process, and protests are expected to be held again today around 7 o'clock on local time. And this is the latest updates for now.
That was our Leila Rahimli bringing the latest on the political tensions in Georgia. In other news, hundreds gathered on a rally against anti-Semitism and in support of Israel in Amsterdam yesterday evening. The event, called We Stand Next to Our Jews, was organized by about 20 Christian and Jewish organizations, local media reports. Organizers said they wanted to send a, quote, strong signal against Jew hatred. The Israeli military says it has struck a facility in the southern part of Lebanon on Thursday, which it believes is used by Hezbollah to store mid-range rockets. The strike comes after both sides accused each other of breaking the ceasefire agreement, which began on Wednesday. The Lebanese army said Israeli forces violated the ceasefire, while the Israeli military said it was responding to violations of the deal by Hezbollah. Thousands in Kyiv experienced power outages following Russian strikes on Ukraine's power grid. Moscow's second major missile attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure this month struck 9 regions, according to the local officials.
This is the aftermath of Russia's missile attack targeting energy infrastructure across Ukraine on Thursday. Over 1 million households lost power immediately after the strikes. However, Russia has targeted energy infrastructure before, and residents say they're prepared.
We have power banks. We have head torches that can be charged. We have everything we need. We are prepared. It's not the first time this has happened. Thank God water is back, as there was no water yesterday.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin says this strike was in retaliation to an earlier attack on Russian territory by Ukraine, in which the country had used US medium-range missiles. US President Joe Biden responded to Russia's attack in a statement on Thursday, calling it outrageous and continuing to pledge support for Ukraine. However, Putin warned of a more intense attack if Ukraine were to acquire nuclear weapons.
If the country with which we are currently fighting becomes a nuclear-armed power, what should we do? In this case, we will adopt and use everything. I want to emphasize this. Adopt and use exactly all the means of destruction at Russia's disposal. Everything. We will not allow this.
The International Atomic Energy Agency says 3 nuclear power plants in Ukraine reduced their electricity generation following Russia's attack. The country's state grid operator warns of power cuts of at least 12 hours due to damages. Ukraine officials are concerned another strike by Russia will deplete the power grid as winter arrives.
Russia and North Korea have been rapidly expanding their military cooperation, according to the Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov. He made the remark during today's visit to North Korea. Belousov said the two countries had reached the highest level of mutual trust and a shared commitment to strengthen cooperation despite global challenges. Russian news agencies reported that Belousov was scheduled to hold talks with North Korea's military officials and political leadership to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Over in Kazakhstan, the Collective Security Treaty Organization summit held in Astana resulted in 14 documents signed. The leaders of Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan agreed, among other things, on a program to reinforce the Tajik-Afghan border, saying they remain committed to establishing a peaceful Afghanistan, free from military conflict, terrorism and drug trafficking. The next CSTO summit is scheduled for next year in Kyrgyzstan. Syrian rebel forces led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group launched a large-scale offensive in northwestern Syria, targeting government-held areas in the provinces of Aleppo and Idlib.
Syrian armed groups led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham have launched a large-scale offensive in northwestern Syria, targeting government-held areas in Aleppo and Idlib provinces. The offensive began near Aleppo, where opposition forces have seized several villages, including al-Kubra and Jarrah and Gubtan al-Jabal. A strategic military base known as the 46th Regiment was also captured. In Idlib, the fighting has expanded towards Saragib, a critical town near the M5 highway which connects major cities. Reportedly, government forces backed by Russian airstrikes are attempting to repel the attacks. The violence has displaced thousands of families, with at least 18 civilian deaths reported following airstrikes on 2 villages in western Aleppo.
Chad's government says it's ended its defense cooperation pact with France in a move that could see around 8,000 French troops leave the Central African country. Chad's foreign ministry says the country wants to fully assert its sovereignty after more than 6 decades of independence. It says the decision would enable it to redefine its strategic partnerships. Chad hosts about 8,000 French troops, in addition to numerous warplanes and other types of military equipment. France has already pulled its troops from Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Over in West Africa, Senegal's President Bassirou Faye has told France to close its military base in the country, according to reports. He says Senegal does not accept the presence of a foreign military base on its territory, as it's been independent since the 1960s. At the moment, there are around 350 French troops in its former colony, mainly in a supportive role. Faye says that they remain open to an economic partnership with France. Thousands of staff at a university in Argentina took to the streets opposing the government's plan to modernize the state-run research institution. Under the proposal of government, a building and land that's being underused is to be sold. The protesters say the sale is an unlawful appropriation of public assets.
Workers in Buenos Aires are angry at the government's plan to sell off underutilized buildings, which include one that is valued at $6 million. Government officials argue that this move is crucial to refocus the National Institute of Agricultural Technology's mission on agricultural productivity. However, unions and workers have denounced the plan as an unlawful appropriation of public assets meant for research purposes. The staff and unions have declared a state of alert as they fear the loss of research assets and the erosion of labour rights. The university's governing council was scheduled to vote on the building's fate on Thursday, but the decision has not yet been made.
In Spain, the government has approved paid climate leave after October's devastating floods, which killed at least 224 people. The leave will grant up to 4 days off, aimed at discouraging workers from taking risks in bad weather. This mechanism is already in place for emergencies. During last month's flooding, companies had previously ordered staff to maintain working hours and blamed the government for failing to provide timely alerts. Crunch United Nations talks to find funding to curb the destruction of nature will resume in Rome in February after negotiations in Colombia this month ended without a deal. The largest summit yet on biodiversity, the so-called COP16 talks in Cali, Colombia, were aimed at boosting efforts to protect nature from deforestation, overexploitation, climate change, and pollution. But the meeting ended with no deal on a roadmap to ramp up funding for species protection. The UN says the talks will continue from the 25th to 27th of February next year to tackle issues left unresolved. Wind farm projects in the Baltic Sea would pose a problem for Sweden's security, according to the Swedish military, after the government rejected plans for a 30-gigawatt offshore wind farm. The armed forces argued that the turbines, towers, and blades interfere with radar systems, compromising the ability to detect threats. Plans for 13 wind farms were scrapped earlier in the month. French President Emmanuel Macron visited the post-fire reconstructed Notre Dame Cathedral a week ahead of its reopening to the public. The restoration of the cathedral was unveiled during the televised visit that showed off new protective measures such as sprinklers and partitioning to safeguard the roof timbers. Notre Dame underwent more than 5 years of reconstruction work after a fire in April 2019, when the cathedral's roof burst into flames, toppling the spire. It took around 600 firefighters and 15 hours to handle the flames. Around 250 companies and hundreds of experts were mobilized for a restoration, costing nearly 700 million euros. It was financed from the 846 million in donations that poured in from over 150 countries. Australia has introduced a social media ban for children under 16. The law regarding platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok passed after intense national debate. The government introduced it, saying it aims to protect young people from cyberbullying and mental health issues.
Starting in January, tech companies will try enforcement methods before the ban fully takes effect in a year's time in Australia. Platforms that don't comply could face fines of up to $32 million. 77% of Australians support the ban. Authorities say the move is crucial for addressing the youth mental health crisis.
We know there is widespread concern and evidence about the severe mental health impact of social media on children. We've seen very disturbing global trends in youth mental health since the rise of social media, especially for girls.
Critics argue Australia's social media ban for under-16s poses privacy risks and isolates vulnerable youth. They argue it reflects a generational disconnect with young people's digital lives.
I don't think it's a good thing, really, because I think that it's not going to stop it, and also the government's taking control of things that it's parents' responsibility. Because parents are going to keep still using their social media, aren't they? And their kids are going to be watching them doing it. So what's the point, really?
Teenagers across the world have criticised Australia's new ban on social media for those under 16, calling it out of touch with reality. They expressed understanding of the ban's intentions, but argued that education and prevention are more effective solutions than a total ban.
I agree that the time we spend in front of screens and the addictive side of social media, those are real problems, the extremely addictive algorithms. But I think a lot of people my age realize it and see their little brothers and sisters spend time on their phones, and that bothers them. And so I think we're quite conscious and that we do understand the problem and assume responsibility. But a total ban, no.
I'm strongly against it because I feel like we are a new generation that is accustomed of having social media in our life, and it's something we use on a daily basis, and I think restricting our use isn't going to help us.
The world watches closely to see if such measures can truly address the challenges posed by social media, and if alternative solutions like education and stronger moderation will prove more effective.
That's all we have for now. Thank you and keep watching A News.